We're the global leader in industrial processing fluids. So essentially, if it's made of metal and can be rolled, be drawn, cast, any of those type of functions, Quaker has a product that can make the process more optimized.
Welcome to episode 56 of The Crownsman Show. Today we are joined by John Brown. He is the Industry Business Manager at Quaker Houghton. He discusses the importance of continually improving and innovating in order to stay ahead in a changing world and what makes them the global leader in industrial process fluids. But before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. First up, we have Savinaw Equipment. Savinaw Equipment supplies new and used mining equipment around the world, from placer to underground to ore processing plants. They have gold concentrating tables, trommels, and mineral jigs in stock now to take advantage of the high gold prices. Head on over to savinawequipment.com where you will find more equipment every day. Next up, we also have Power Zone Equipment. When you need a specialized team of world-class engineers for your oil and gas pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with PowerZone. Visit them at powerzone.com. Well, let's get on with episode 56. Here's Jerrod Downey and John Brown.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Crownsman Show. I am your host, Jerrod Downey. Joining me today is the Industry Business Manager for Mining, John Brown. He is with Quaker Houghton. Hi, John. How are you?
Fine. How are you doing, Jerrod?
I'm good. Yeah, it's been fun getting ready to do this interview with you and your team. We've got a lot to cover. I certainly realized how little I knew about what your company did. At first glance, I thought I did, so it's been an interesting learning experience. So it's going to be exciting to sort of share that with the audience.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's start with that first snapshot, John. Quaker Houghton, what is sort of they encompass as a company?
Well, from a broad spectrum, we're the global leader in industrial processing fluids. So essentially, if it's made of metal and can be rolled, be drawn, cast, any of those type of functions, Quaker has a product that can make the process more optimized.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm going to have to ask some layman questions here, because when I initially thought, I was thinking it was more like lubricants and oils and that, but you sort of are, but it's sort of a specialized version of it. Is that right?
Right. So they're all processing fluids. So they're not necessarily the oils, they can be, but they're not necessarily the oils that go into the machinery like an engine oil necessarily. But for any of those processes where you're trying to create the steel, create metal shapes, cutting it, forming it, any of that, there's different fluids that are used to make that process more efficient.
Right.
In the steel industry, going from molten iron ore steel to creating that into sheets of metal, it has to go through several different processes to become the finished product that you would see in the marketplace.
I love these guys. So you're definitely the company that when you see an operation go to a plant, you don't. I always say the plants are the things that people don't see, but then there's even operations within the plant that people really don't see, and that's really where you land, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's really hard to pinpoint it because you're used to seeing certain labels on a 5-gallon container or a pint of oil, something like that, and a lot of people will associate the names with different oil companies like that, but essentially it's what the larger companies like a U.S. Steel or whoever it may be, they would use those processing fluids to create their end product for their customers.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to just highlight something, because when I was going through, I noticed that there was a combination, a business combination that happened. I actually don't have the date in front of me, but Quaker Chemical, which I think one of them is like 100-year-old company, and then Houghton International, they actually combined to make Quaker Houghton. Is that right?
Yeah, so we actually just celebrated our 1-year anniversary from the combination. We had announced it some time ago, but Quaker Chemical was the initial company that I'm from, Legacy Quaker. It was founded in 1918, so 102 years old. And last year we merged with Houghton International, which was a 150-year-old company, 1865. And both companies had similar product lines, or similar industries, I should say, but we had different products within um, I guess, the process. So we have a total product offering from that combination. Really been able to become a stronger company and offer our customers a total product offering that's unmatched.
I saw I was going on YouTube and I saw a video sort of about the combination, and one thing it talked about is the R&D side of it, being able to develop innovative products within that. Does that, I mean, a year is actually not very long, but does that something that gets going pretty quickly when those two large old companies come together? Is that R&D side of it get expedited pretty quick?
Yeah, that's really one of our strongest offerings to our customer base. We're very intimate with our customers. We have a lot of people on site at all of these different large customers where we can leverage our knowledge, and the combination is really accelerated, like you said, because we have two different knowledge bases that we've been able to utilize to really push out quite a bit of R&D, and that's something that as a company we've really invested in. Um, for the length of the company. So it's something that we work with our customers and try to make their process better for any issues that we see.
Yeah, I just going into some of the products or sort of the product line, and again, I apologize, John, because I I understand what it is, but I knew so little about it that it was so much of it was new to me, and the fire, I'm going to get this right. The fire-resistant hydraulic fluid technology, is that fairly new, or could you just explain it a little bit more of what that's all about? I think there's actually I was watching a video of it testing last night, and while you sort of explain it, I'll get Gowdy to bring that up so the audience can see it. But can you just talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so that's one of our product lines. It's fire-resistant hydraulic fluids. So normal hydraulic fluids are usually mineral oil based. They've been around for forever, and they're used in all sorts of applications. But our product line, it's been around since the mid 1900s, and there's different classifications of fire resistant hydraulic fluids that can be used in different applications. These are typically used in an area where a fire is common to happen, or if it does happen, it could be a catastrophic event. So we have different products that would replace just an anti-wear mineral oil based hydraulic fluid, and you take out the fire risk.
So when you say replace the mineral, so is this? Could you just explain that a little bit? I mean, I not to get too technical on it, but so it's mineral to synthetic. I'm guessing is the difference? Is that right?
Essentially, so there's different classifications of it, but you're going from a product that's solely based on mineral oil for lubrication properties and everything that you get with mineral oil that you would put into a hydraulic system. You're getting those same benefits by using either a man-made technology. There's emulsion technology. There's different classifications that you can go into for a specific operation to replace that. So then if you were to have a leak and a fire present, it doesn't propagate back to that source where it's coming from and cause a large fire.
I was going through some of the pictures that Ryan sent us, and I wanted to touch on, like, for example, could you put it into sort of a real world example? Maybe an underground mine, steel mill. I saw some pictures from the underground mining operation, where there's oil and stuff like that around there. Can you kind of unpack how it applies in real world to, let's say, an underground mine?
Yeah, definitely. Well, in any underground mining situation, coal specifically, what we're talking about with this case study, having any sort of fire is a potential to have a catastrophe, whether that is igniting coal dust that's in the air, or coal is obviously combustible. So starting a major fire, it's just something you can't do. So most things underground considered fireproof, and that's what you're trying to go to. There is still mineral oil products that are used underground. In the specific case study that Ryan gave, there was a hydraulic fluid pack that he overheated. A hydraulic line burnt through, and there was hydraulic oil that was kind of spraying everywhere. In this specific situation, the customer was using one of our fire-resistant hydraulic fluids. So when it sprayed out, if it landed on a hot manifold or something like that, it didn't catch fire. So in this situation, it actually prevented a large fire from happening because it self-extinguished itself.
So in a way, you can't avoid a fire happening ever. That's not, but you always are goal to. But if it does, there has to be that product in place that it doesn't just basically spread, essentially, right?
Right, and there usually you have a fire suppressant system that's in line with most of these types of machinery. So if you do have a fire, it would try to suppress that. But the idea of a fire-resistant hydraulic fluid is to prevent that fire from happening in the first place. So if you can prevent that rather than trying to control it, you're really one step ahead.
I come from a little bit more on the mining side, so I'm more familiar with it. The steel mill is something that I really want to unpack of how that product is applicable in the steel mill. Can you just sort of give us a setup of where it's going to be used in the steel mill, why it's important? I know it's about keeping it away from going back to the source and things like that. Can you unpack that a bit for us?
Well, in a steel mill, you're talking about very, very high temperatures where a fire, it happens regularly. Trying to control that is really what you're trying to do. So anywhere a hydraulic piece of equipment is being operated in a steel mill, using fire-resistant hydraulic fluids is important. Most operations have transferred away from using just a AW68 46 type mineral oil product, and they're using these now. But there was an example in a Thailand steel mill where they had an electric arc furnace that was used to create the molten steel, and sparks were flying everywhere. There was mineral oil that had pooled close by, and it caused a large fire because it caught on fire. So what Quaker Houghton did, we went in and we changed the system over to a fire-resistant hydraulic fluid, and you prevent that issue from happening in the future.
Right. And I guess you also don't need to change out probably millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment as well, right?
Right. And ultimately that's first off safety for personnel, but after that, capital equipment, you can get into the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment, depending on if you're in a steel mill, if you're on a surface mine, if you're whatever type of application, you're really putting a lot of capital equipment at risk by not using it.
So one question, you mentioned a couple, like that example you just mentioned in Thailand, that they moved away from the mineral. So is that something new, or have they, how recently was a company using, are most companies switching to the fire resistant now, or is it going on for 50 years?
Most companies they've been using it for a very long period of time, but depending on which market you're in, people may use different things. So I think that example was probably from about 10 years ago, but that's fairly recent in the life of the project. So it's very common now that you would see that, more common than not. But there still are operations where you may not see that just because of the price difference that you may see between a regular hydraulic and a fire resistant.
Yeah, and is that that is why someone wouldn't? Is that essentially the only reason, or is there some cases where you just have to use mineral based still?
Well, typically the cost is one factor that people look at. Everybody looks at cost and their bottom line with it. But if you compare that with the cost of loss of equipment, and most of the operations that we see, there has been some sort of loss of equipment at some point in their life cycle. So if you weigh that or the insurance demands that you have for having a product that's prone to a fire as opposed to a fire resistant, there can be a substantial difference.
It's funny, these things that, these little things that you don't even think about. It. So obviously, yeah, from an insurance perspective on a major mining operation, to be able to say, hey, we use this type of product, I mean, that's a huge bottom line right there, I would assume.
Oh, it's huge, and it's something that you want people to be proactive about. If they have a large mining operation that uses a hydraulic shovel, I mean, maybe a $10 million piece of equipment, they may not have had a fire in one for 5-10 years, but even every 10 years, that's still a large investment that they could lose potentially because of that. Not to mention if someone operating that equipment were to be injured or worse, it's minuscule in comparison to that.
Yeah. And never mind the shutdown time.
Well,
when you
yeah,
get
that's
a $10
another
million
side of it,
piece of equipment catches on fire.
Yeah, exactly.
So it goes into sort of, correct me as I try to stumble through this, John. You've got the fire-resistant hydraulic fluids. So I've got here, there's sort of 4 classes, and they're essentially labeled as a water-based fluid. Can you sort of break those down in sort of a more technical terminology?
Well, yeah, and it depends how technical you want me to get with it. But so essentially, there's 4 different classes. They're called HF is the first letters with it for hydraulic fluid, and then you have A, B, C, and D. So HFA, HFB, HFC, HFD. An HFA it's a water-based technology called an emulsion, and these products are referred to as a 95-5 fluid, meaning 95% water mixed at the customer site with 5% of the product that we would ship. And today's modern technology, it's more around 98% water that's used on site and 2% of the product. And this is an oil and water emulsion. So oil and water, obviously, they don't like to mix. So we use emulsifiers to hold the oil in place. And then this product is completely fire resistant because of the amount of water that's actually in the product. And the other additives and the oil that's in it, or some of them can be synthetic without oil, but all of the additives give the desired characteristics, whether it's corrosion, protection, bioresistance to fungus and bacteria, stability, any of the other additives, they do the function. And the water really takes care of the fire resistant portion of it. These are typically used in lighter duty systems or systems where you can tolerate a large loss of oil. So specifically for the mining industry, longwall mining underground, there's hundreds of large hydraulic cylinders and hoses that go between. It's a rough environment. There's a lot of leakage with that. So being able to mix it 98% water on site, 2% of fluid, you can really keep those costs down. Where if you had a different type of hydraulic fluid, the cost would just be incrementally more. So that would be the first type, HFA fluid. HFB is similar, and it's an invert emulsion. It's a water and oil type product where you have 60% oil and 40% water. This one it's a little bit harder to keep stable, and it's an older technology that's starting to go away from the industry now. But essentially, the oil part of the product that does the traditional hydraulic oil characteristics. So it takes care of that side, whereas the water, it does the fire resistancy as well. So you still may have a portion of it that catches on fire, but the water will snuff it out. Like I said, this type of invert emulsion is kind of getting away from the industry now. But that's type B. Type C is a water glycol product. So you have water, ethylene glycol, and polyglycol with different additives. And this is typically 40 to 50% water. It has a lower cost associated with it as well. So that's why you'd use it in a lot of steel mill applications, molding, metal die casting, a few different operations, but it's limited in the operating pressure and the temperature that you can use in an industry. And then the last one would be the direct cross for an anti-wear mineral oil hydraulic product. It's called HFD, and it can either be a polyol ester technology, which that's the side that Quaker Chemical, it really hung its hat on, and then the phosphate ester technology, which Houghton International hung its hat on. And they're both direct replacements for just a regular AW68 product. That's the one that you can almost plug and place, and it's still going to have the same sill compatibility, metal compatibility, and functions the same as one of the other products. But I think that's the one you alluded to with the video, where it does not propagate back to the source. Yeah. So that's where you could use it in place for those products.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify this. So this HFD, is that a product that has come out of the combination?
Or not out of the combination, but we had strengths in one area, and Houghton had strengths in another area. So putting them both together is a total product offering.
I see.
And you would use one in a certain place over another place. There may be some advantages with temperature. So there's some differences with it, but now having the total product portfolio, it's really given us options for our customers.
You made a comment, I think it's when you were referring to the HFA, that it used to be 95%, but now it's getting closer to 98%. Is that because of development? Is it continue, engineers and chemists are continuing to develop it? Is that where that's from?
Yeah, originally it was a higher mineral oil based, and again, not to get too technical with it, but you used to have macro emulsions where the emulsion had large oil molecules in it, and over time they've become smaller to become a micro emulsion. They're more stable. That's really the development that's taken place over the past, let's say 30 years maybe, where they've become more stable, and even moving to the synthetic side where all the additives are dissolved into it rather than held in suspension as an emulsion. It hasn't been from the combination itself, but just over time, that's the way that the market's gone. And lower concentration and more water being able to use, and having a less expensive product for all customers.
I want to just discuss the industry served in a moment, but I want to jump over to your career for a second, John, because I'm interested because you started with Quaker. You were with other companies before Quaker, but you started with this Quaker Houghton. You originally were with Quaker. What was your role? Because I see, were you on the engineering side? I was just trying to understand what that would be in sort of those original roles that you played in the company.
Well, by trade, I am an engineer by trade. I started with Quaker, I believe it was 9 years ago now, in the service and sales portion of it, and a service engineer. So I started and actually moved internationally to Australia for the first portion of my career, and was servicing mining customers in Australia. So that took on account management as well as product development, and getting exposed to the different industries like steel, automotive, metalworking, and all that.
Oh, I see. When you come out of sort of the mining side, but you've, just to give, I think most people watching would have an understanding of it, but I just want to make sure that we do cover it because it's important, is just just the amount of industries. I think, again, correct me on what I get wrong, but I think Quaker Houghton is in 25 countries. I think are they actually operating in those 25 countries?
Well, so the footprint's definitely grown larger with the combination. So I believe we operate in 115 countries, have product that actually go to customer.
I was a little off.
Well, we have around 100, so 115 different countries. We have 15,000 customers, 4,000 associates worldwide. I think we have 35 manufacturing plants, so that might be the different countries where we're actually manufacturing product, probably within 25. So it's definitely grown quite a bit, but it's truly a global company where we utilize, whether it's raw materials, sales expertise, technical expertise from a global standpoint. So it's grown quite a bit in the past 10 years.
And I mean, industry served, obviously it's any, just to rattle them off. I mean, tube and pipe, mining, tunneling. I mean, there's so many that you serve. Is there a primary, when it comes to, some of these questions I'm after are going to be a little bit off, but it's just these things I don't know. Is there a few primary industries that Quaker Houghton is? I mean, it's sort of that bread and butter of the company.
I would say in the steel industry, and then there's automotive as well. It's really so diverse, but I would say the steel industry, and we held Legacy Quaker held a large portion of the steel industry globally. Houghton International also held a large portion of the steel industry globally. Different product lines, different customer base, combining together, we really did have a total product offering that we were able to offer all customers. So that would probably be our bread and butter. The auto industry, some of our largest customers are GM, Ford, Fiat, Chrysler, large multinational companies. So it's, between those two, that makes up a large portion of Quaker.
When you go on, because you've actually been on the account management side, and I'm always curious when I see a company that you've got a product that is essentially a chemist design, and then you're going to a company that builds cars.
Yeah,
there's a gap between those two things, and you're closing that gap. When you land on site on a mining operation, automotive, whatever it is, how much education is required to go in, or do generally those sizes of companies, I mean, obviously you talk about a Ford, do they have someone that specializes in it, or how does that communication even happen?
Well, and I deal primarily with the mining side, so I'll speak with that. What I find is that depending on your customer base, whether it's in the US, Australia, China, Middle East, wherever it is, there's a different knowledge and expectation. There's a different level of customer that you're dealing with. And certain customers, they want to know just the nuts and bolts basics, approvals, what can be used, how it can help, bottom line type figures. Whereas other customers, they really want to dive into the chemistry and understand and educate and learn, and both work, both are great. I feel like if you're in the sales and technical sales area, you have to tailor what you're saying towards your audience. So if they want to be technical and get down to the nitty gritty with every detail, then go over that and really show your technical knowledge and how you can assist. And some customers, they just want the basics. Their primary knowledge is in the operation that they're around, and they want to know how you can assist in their daily day-to-day functions that they're doing, and what your product can do compared to what's available in the market.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but if you go to a mine, let's say it's a new mining operation, I'm sure you've been to them where they're kind of just about to turn the key on that type of operation. How long would it take from the day that you first start communication before you're integrating your everything into their system? Is this like a year process? Is it a month? Like on a large scale mine?
Large scale mine, again, it really depends on what area of the world you're in. In certain countries, this could take years, developing those relationships. There's a trust factor involved with it. And then, all the different risk assessments and paperwork and everything that you need to go over to meet certain criteria, that could take quite a while. So you may have someone stationed there for a long period of time, whereas others, they have a need. They may have a knowledge pre-existing of your company, and you can come in and implement something, much quicker. But for the large scale, I'd say it could take, 6 months to a year, possibly, to get some of these. Whereas some products, they're pretty fast to integrate and show them the data and get them to understand the benefit that you can offer.
We did a show. It was a heavy haul show, and they basically made the pieces for the heavy haul for moving cranes and things like that. And something that stood out to me was that they had to get different permits across each state. so it could be quite complex. In this type of product, when you have 25 countries, 35 manufacturing plants, things like that, when you have that setup, is the certification, if it's in Thailand and then you're putting the same product in Australia and then, now you're coming into British Columbia and, all this type of thing, are you required to do all this permitting, or is there sort of a certification body that sort of allows you to distribute into all these places based on like safety and those types of things?
Well, depending on the product, yes and no. So most of the hydraulic fluids that we've been talking about, they're factory mutual approved, and so that's a global permitting type agency, and it's been around for 100 years for data in the field. So something like that, it carries weight in all countries. But there are local approvals that you may need to get for Australia specifically, for the US specifically, and go through different testing bodies for that. So depending on the product, part of the due diligence that we have to do is find out what approvals are necessary, who we need to speak with to gain those approvals, and then do a cost analysis on that. So it can be somewhat cumbersome depending on which product we're doing, because it may be the same product and same industry, but we may have to get a German approval here, an Australian approval here, a US approval there. And that's where working with a global company, a truly global company, comes in handy, because we have associates worldwide that can help us with this, and we can bounce back and forth quite a bit to make sure that we meet all the regulatory approvals necessary.
I would think that the combination of the two companies also helps with that now as well.
Yeah, it definitely makes us stronger in that sense, and we've got a good footprint to cover everything.
Yeah, the last question I have, just as we wrap up, is my last layman question of the day, I hope, is this mineral-based as opposed to, am I saying it right? Would it be water-based as opposed to mineral-based? Is that?
So most of the fluids that we talked about, HFA, B, and C, they're all water-based. So the primary fire-resistant property with it will be the water that's involved with it. Whereas the HFD products, those are all man-made esters in the lab. So it's more of a synthetic and the truer sense, and how it puts out a fire.
So will there be a point where mineral-based will it continue to be used less and less as the products on the water-based and the synthetic-based get better and better and safer, or will it always be a part of it specifically in your stream?
Well, I think it's always going to be a part of the mix. You're going to have different applications that are very leaky, or just the cost associated with whatever it may be. They're going to probably stick to regular mineral-based product, but in certain areas, say underground mining in India, all fluids have to be fire resistant that go into those machines. So that's one market that's made that decision. Any other market globally, if they make that decision, then they would have to convert to the fire resistant type hydraulic fluids. So I think moving forward, there's going to be a larger market with it, just because people are going to be moving towards safer alternatives, and not just on the fire side, also biodegradability. Everyone is trying to be more sustainable and have a lower footprint on the environment, and that's the benefit of having, say, the HFD type product. It's 80% biodegradability, as opposed to a mineral oil that is not biodegradable.
So that's interesting. So in India, for mining operations specifically, that's actually a mandate. So I would think too, when a country does it, if it works well, inevitably the other countries start to follow. Right? Is that?
People tend to follow suit, and say in the U.S. underground mining market, there's quite a bit of material that's already meant to be fire resistant, fireproof, whether that's conveyor belts, materials that are used underground. Those strides have already been taken, and I see in the future that just going further and further to try to create a safer operation and a lower environmental impact operation as well.
So there's still room to grow.
Still room to grow. I'm hoping. I'm young in my career.
Good. Well, thanks, John, for coming on the show. We really do appreciate it. And thanks for getting a little more technical with us. I mean, I didn't want to go too deep in it. I mean, I can do about a 40-minute show just on the technical stuff because I lean towards that stuff. But I do appreciate it. It's quite interesting, again, getting to see a company that the product from the company that you normally wouldn't even see the product. It's inside a house somewhere, you never even think about it. So it's quite interesting for us.
Yeah, it's an interesting company with different niche markets and opportunities. So it's great to be a part of it and see all they have to offer.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, John. We do appreciate it. I'm going to do a quick sign off to the audience here, and thank you for coming on.
Yes, sir. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. If you didn't learn something from that interview, I would say you're already an expert in the field because there was a lot we unpacked. Thank you, John, for coming on. Thank you for watching, everybody. Please subscribe, follow, comment, and suggest guests. You should see our lineup for September, the remainder of September and October. There's a ton of companies from all different industries coming on to Crownsman Energy, Mining Now, and of course, The Crownsman Show. So please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Recommend guests, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. Also, head on over to crownsman.com/donations, where you can help support the production of the show. There's two options, the $5 monthly subscription option and the support heavy industry one-time donation option. Again, crownsman.com/donations. Thank you so much, and we will see you on the next episode.